Want to add some thrill to your chill? Cocoa Beach on Florida's Space Coast has it all, with miles of open beach and easy access to the Banana River and Indian River Lagoon. Cocoa Beach is your outdoor playground. Surf, foil, kite surf, jet ski, paddleboard, kayak, water ski. If you can do it in a bathing suit, you can do it on Cocoa Beach. Dive into the adventurous side of Cocoa Beach at legendarycocobeach.com.
Brought to you by the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander. Hello, friends. Jack, Flight School O'Brien here, also known as Jack. Still can touch net if I get a running start and haven't eaten heavy breakfast. O'Brien. Both nicknames that I go by. Inviting you to check out Miles and Jack Got Mad Boosties for a weekly basketball conversation with me and my co-host from the Daily Zeitgeist, Miles Gray. We are joined by comedians, writers, podcasters, and fellow NBA fans as we discuss the latest news and events from around the league. Check it out. Miles and Jack Got Mad Boosties. Brought to you by the first ever Toyota Grand Highlander.
The NFL Draft is now officially open. Welcome to another edition of Draft Season. John Schmelk, Tony Pauline, back in our usual environs, back from Frisco and Mobile for the Shrine and Senior Bowls. Today's episode of Draft Season is brought to you by Visa. Visa looks at over 500 data points on transactions to help prevent fraud, so you can worry less and focus on this podcast. Shop with Visa because security looks good on you. Tony, we had probably more than 500 data points as we looked at all these players down there at Shrine and Senior Bowl, but it's good to be back home, but very, very fruitful trips, and we learned a lot about a lot of these players.
6 days of practice, early morning practices for the Shrine game. You know, some of those practices dragged, and, it's an entire day because after practice is over, you write your reports, you get your news, and then you got to hang out and try and see what else is going on with the chatter. So, yeah, it's always fun. But, like you said, towards the end of the trip, you're looking to get back home, and soon we'll be on our way to Indianapolis.
Yeah, and everybody wants to talk about the quarterbacks, Tony, so let's start there. And to me, all these quarterbacks are where they were when this started, before we showed up at these two events. I don't think anyone moved or changed at all, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, except for maybe Carter Bradley, but we'll talk about him. I mean, none of the top quarterbacks really impressed. I heard people talking about Bo Nix and Michael Penix. I mean, maybe they had a couple of passes here and there, but overall, you didn't come out of the Senior Bowl thinking that Bo Nix had solidified himself as a first-round pick. You didn't think that Michael Penix really improved his draft stock. I mean, these guys were up and down for the most part, except for Carter Bradley of South Alabama, who, you and I were there watching the 7-on-7s, and we were complaining because all the quarterbacks, except for Carter Bradley, on the 7-on-7s, would just dump the ball off to the running back 2 or 3 yards off the line of scrimmage. He was the only guy that was consistently pushing the ball to the intermediate field, and he was making good throws. Now, did he help his draft stock? Well, yeah, he probably solidified himself as a late-round pick. But none of the top guys at the Shrine or the Senior Bowl really, you come out of the 3 days of practice, say, yeah, that guy has definitely improved himself a full round or half a round, or Bo Nix is definitely a first-round pick right now. That did not happen at the quarterback position this year.
No, Tony, I'm with you 100%. Running back spot, I think the game is probably more important for the running back spot and the linebacker spot than probably any other position. You'd only see so much at practice. But there were some guys that I thought jumped out. And, Marshawn Lloyd did not play in the game. But over the course of practice, boy, that guy's got some quicks on him. He looked quicker than, and I watched a bunch of USC tape, obviously, to watch Caleb Williams. Marshawn Lloyd never really jumped out to me, but I thought in person he looked very, very quick. And then we could touch on the other guys.
Yeah, he was outstanding the first day, without a doubt. I mean, there was a lot of hooting and hollering because he moves well laterally. He would find the hole and boom, he'd take it right up the field. He showed a burst, showed the ability to beat defenders into the open field. I don't think he carried it through all 3 days, but I think he showed enough as during that first day of practice to get a lot of people looking at him in a running back class where we really don't know who the number one running back is or where the first running backs are going to go, because it's a mishmash of solid but not great prospects. I mean, you're looking at this running back class where it's probably going to start players to start to come off the board somewhere in the late part of round 2. I don't think Marshawn Lloyd's that is going to go that early, but still his performance in a class of nice but not great running backs, I think really helped himself.
Yeah, look, I think his whole class is part-time backs, right, Tony? No one's a 18 to 20 carry type of guy, and those guys, don't really exist anymore anyway. But, the guys that can play roles, and I think Marshawn Lloyd shows that he can be that elusive speed back. And there were 3 other guys that I know you think did pretty well, starting with one of the few small school guys that actually made it to Mobile.
Yeah, Dylan Laub of New Hampshire. Now, he's more of your all-around back. I mean, he was good carrying the ball, showed the ability to get around the corner, get around the perimeter, caught the ball very well. And you go back to his history at New Hampshire, he was an exceptional return specialist. So I think Dylan Laub, like you said, sort of your situation, you say back up more of your situational role type of player. I think with his pass catching and what he showed with his foot quickness at the Senior Bowl, you're looking at a late round situational third down type back.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then you also wanted to know Blake Watson and Deshaun Fenwick.
Yeah, Blake Watson of Memphis, Deshaun Fenwick of Oregon State. Watson, I was listening to scouts and talking to scouts. They like him out of Memphis. And here's a guy who, like Fenwick of Oregon State, wasn't graded coming into the season. And now scouts watched him last season. He showed a terrific burst. I mean, terrific burst through the hole. Excellent playing speed. He's a guy that's definitely on the scouting radar as a potential late-round pick. Same thing with Fenwick. I mean, Fenwick had great footwork, in superior quickness, shows the ability to create yardage. And again, another guy, smaller back, but he hits the hole and he's gone, like Laub, even like maybe Marshawn Lloyd to an extent. These guys are situational role players that teams are going to look at in the very late rounds.
Now, Fenwick and Watson, just so people understand, they were at Shrine. 2 other Senior Bowl guys that I want to bring up real quick. One is Rasheen Ali, Tony, who had to leave. Unfortunately, he tore his bicep. I think it was on the first day of practice. But when he was out there, I thought he showed up as a receiver. I thought he was pretty impressive. He measured in a 5'11", 204. One of the taller running backs in there. They had 5 backs there that were sub-5, 6 backs that were sub-5'10". And then I want to ask you about Cody Schrader, who was probably the most accomplished running back there in terms of, production over the course of the year. In Missouri, over 1,600 yards. He caught 5 passes in the game, and I think that was a goal for him to show he could be a receiver, and I think he did that at least in the game. But you're just not wowed by his juice watching him carry the ball.
And that's the thing is, in the lead up to the Senior Bowl, I kept hearing from his team, he's fast, he's going to run well, he's fast. And when you hear that, you know that they're concerned about the speed. And he really didn't show it. He also runs with a bit of an upright style, which is not good. Great story. Tarleton State transfer, did a great job at Missouri this year that beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, had some upsets. But again, it's a projection. And while he did very well in college, he doesn't project all that well to the next level, maybe a late round pick. I think the injury that you mentioned with Ali, that really hurts because he's probably going to, if he's drafted, it's going to be very late. The rest of the pre-draft process is on the shelf for him. And he is an explosive back. He's a guy at Marshall. You watch him picks up big chunks of yardage consistently from the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, no question. All right, let's jump over to wide receiver here, Tony. Let's start with the Shrine game where you had a trio of Washingtons, a Johnson, and a Stoops that really impressed you, along with a Tip Ryman.
Yeah, and Tip Ryman was the tight end from Illinois, but and there are different types of receivers. I think last year when we saw Jordan Addison, who was 6'1", barely 180 pounds, ran a 4.51 at the combine, didn't run his pro day. And we've talked about this a couple of times. You're starting to see a change in the receiver position where, they don't care if you're 6'2", 215 pounds and went out for the contested throw. They don't care if you run 4.32. What they care about is your route running. You got to be super quick and you got to be able to separate through your routes and come open. And that's what the 3 Washingtons, Malik Washington of Virginia, Casey Washington of Illinois, who was not graded by scouts coming into the season, Taj Washington of USC, Drake Stoops, the son of Bob Stoops at Oklahoma. These guys during Shrine Bowl practices were uncoverable. I mean, you could not, the defensive backs were basically doing pirouettes on the field, trying to stay with these guys out of their breaks, and then they caught everything. And then what was equally as impressive is, they quickly turn it upfield and they show the ability to create yardage. So they're not the biggest guys in the world. They're going to need space to work, But it's impossible to cover these guys out of their routes, and that's what the league wants. As far as Cornelius Johnson is concerned, we both watched him. He's a bit of a long strider, but he ran much better routes than what anyone thought. He's a terrific pass catcher in the sense that he consistently extends his hands to make the reception away from his frame. He's big, so he can win out for the contested throw, and he also did a good job blocking downfield. So I think Cornelius Johnson, who kind of fell off the scouting radar, people expected him. He got a high grade coming into the 2022 season. As we talked about numerous times on the show, Michigan didn't throw the ball all that much. They didn't need to with that offensive line, that running game. But I think Cornelius Johnson is starting to get back to the point where scouts thought he was entering the 2022 season. I think he was quicker than we thought, much better routes than we thought. And as we expected, caught the ball exceptionally well. You mentioned Tip Ryman, one of the few tight ends on this list. A big guy, 6'5.5", 271 pounds. As I wrote at Sportskeeda, he's going to run in the low 4.5s. Really was never a big part of that Illinois passing game, but he catches the ball well. He's got his body is built to block, and I think what's going to happen is he's going to surprise a lot of people at the combine, and people are going to be talking about Tip Ryman, who I believe established himself as a day 3 pick, where coming into the process, you thought he was more of a priority free agent.
Yeah, the one guy at the Senior Bowl that impressed me at tight end, Tony, and then we'll get to the Senior Bowl wide receivers, was Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State. I thought he did a nice job. And, talking to people, I did not watch him before we got there. He played some fullback for them. He played some H-back for them. Somebody made a Kyle Juszczyk comp for me. And I just thought he showed some savviness. There was a red zone session in the 3rd day of practice where he was just manhandling guys, bodying them, pushing them out of the way. Safeties were just not strong enough to stick with him. I thought Sinnott had a pretty good week.
He is incredibly athletic, and he's another tight end that's going to test well at the combine, and he catches the ball well. The question is the body type. You mentioned the H-back. He looks more like an H-back fullback than he does, your traditional tight end. So that could be a problem for some teams. But as far as the athleticism and the football skills, the guy has improved every year, and you're right. He did show a lot of flashes and a lot of ability at the Senior Bowl.
No question about it. All right, let's go to the wide receivers at the Senior Bowl. The two guys you wanted to mention, and I'll get to a couple from me, is Johnny Wilson, who's obviously the wide receiver from Florida State, who we'll see if he stays at wide receiver, a very long player, over 6'7" is what he measured in at. And then Roman Wilson, who unfortunately had to leave due to injury midway through the week, but he was basically uncoverable all over the field.
Yeah, Wilson, it's going to be interesting watching Wilson. Do they move him to a move tight end position? You mentioned he was 6'7". He's also like 236 pounds.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The fact is, he caught the ball exceptionally well at the Senior Bowl. Consistently extending his hands, catching the ball away from his frame, and that's what you want to see. You want to see good football fundamentals at every position, and he did it well. He won out for the contested throws. His route running leaves a lot to be desired, which is why I think what teams are going to try and do is put 10 or 15 pounds on him and then turn him into a tight end. First as a move tight end that you line up in the slot, maybe put him in motion before the snap of the ball, not ask him to block too much, but he's got the pass catching skills. And, Roman Wilson was the sort of the Washington receivers of the Senior Bowl, if you will, because he ran great routes. He was tough to cover. He had a concussion. He hit his head hard on one play, and we saw it. He had to sit out. He sat out of the team portion of it. Then he came back at the very end in the one-on-ones. But I think Roman Wilson did everything that people expected him to do, plus more. And I think he's established himself, or at least cemented himself, as a 3rd-round choice. Yeah,
I'll throw a couple of names out there. Ladd McConkey, I thought, showed off his route running again. We'll see how he tests. That's going to be big for him in terms of where he goes. Malachi Corley, again, I wish I would have seen a little bit more from him. I'm going to rewatch his reps in one-on-ones to see how he ran routes. That was a big goal for him when he was there. But, man, Tony, that guy is built like a tank. Just standing next to him, he looks like a running back. Like, teams are going to find a way to use him, and he's going to be an interesting player. And then the other guy I want to mention is Devontae Walker, because watching his tape at North Carolina, they used him very much like a vertical threat, right? He was constantly a deep threat for Drake May. But I thought he got open on a variety of routes at the Senior Bowl. He was able to separate crossers, slants, intermediate, short, deep. The problem is that he just didn't finish a lot of plays, which ironically was not a problem on his tape. He only had 3 drops in North Carolina this year. So I think there'll be some differing opinions on Walker because of how the week was kind of up and down for him.
Yeah, and you're being nice. I'll say plainly, he was dropping 3 passes a day. I mean, he couldn't hold on to the ball, and he was, for lack of a better term, spanking Kalen Kim. I mean, when Kalen Kim went one-on-one, he was constantly getting separation. I mean, he was an open target, and I jokingly said to his team, to his agents on Wednesday night, I was like, you better get some stickum or something put on this guy's hands because he's doing everything great, except he's not catching the ball. And you're right. I thought he had a terrific week as far as showing the ability to separate. I wish he would have held on to the ball better. I think McConkey and Malachi Corley of Western Kentucky, again, they fit the mold of, especially McConkey, not really big. He's probably going to run in the 4.5s, but he's just a great route runner, and he separates and he catches everything that's thrown to him. And there's probably going to be a place in day 2 for Ladd McConkey because of that route running ability, because of that versatility and dependability catching the football.
Yeah, Ricky Pearsall, I'll throw out there too. Another guy that had a really nice week. He did so well the first couple of days, he kind of pulled the ripcord a little bit and got out of there.
Again, another guy who's not big, not fast, but very dependable and knows how to separate.
2 other guys, Tony, real quick, I want to get to. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. I know it's very hard for there to be a sleeper that attended the University of Georgia, but I thought he was as solid as you get during the week. You watch him run, you're not wowed by it. Change of direction, you're not wowed by it. But he caught everything. He got open all over the field. He was proficient. He was reliable. I don't think he's a, first round or second round pick. He might not go to the 4th round or the 5th round. But I think whatever NFL team gets him is going to get a wide receiver they can put in there pretty early and be fairly reliable.
He was good, especially the last day of practice. I thought he really asserted himself. He was given late round grades coming into the season, but with the new quarterback there and some other receivers there, took a while to get his feet underneath him. I look at him more like a day 3 choice, and you're looking at maybe a 4th receiver at the next level.
Yeah.
But, he's one of those guys that, that's why you go to the Senior Bowl, because you get the chance to stand out and do things that you weren't able to do at college, sort of like Cornelius Johnson to Shrine Bowl.
No, I'm with you. And the final one is Xavier Legette, Tony. He had a rough first day. I know he got better as the week went along. I'm going to try to rewatch his reps over the course of this week when I go through the practice tape again. Your thoughts on him?
I mean, he was okay. The thing about Legette is he's 220 pounds, and we're told about how he's going to run a 4.3. He doesn't look like a 4.3 guy on the field. I mean, he looked like, he's 40 fast and not football fast. And he's got to show that he's more than just a vertical receiver, because again, if he's running 4.3 in a straight line, you're not going to be selected as high as a guy who runs great routes these days, as high as a Ladd McConkey. Doesn't mean you're not going to be a good NFL receiver. It just means that you're not going to go as early in the draft as some other players. I think he's got a ways to go before he's really NFL ready.
I know some people in their mock drafts have slid him into the back end of the 1st round, Tony. I don't see that at all. I think he is
Walker. I've seen Walker get a lot of 1st round love. The kid from North Carolina we talked about. I just don't see it with him either.
Yeah, I don't know how you pick either of those guys over an Adonai Mitchell from Texas or a Tony Franklin from Oregon. I just don't see how you could pick either of those guys over those two, myself personally. And then that would make, goodness, like 6 first-round wideouts, which would be a whole lot. All right, let's move on now to the offensive line, the big guys up front, Tony. And boy, this group was fun to watch. Yeah. This is by far the biggest list that either one of us put together here for this show. Let's start with the interior guys, because I thought they did a really nice job. Jackson Powers Johnson, I think, was probably the best offensive lineman we saw at both places. He was that dominant. Unfortunately, he had a hamstring injury that he came into the week with that he aggravated. Good for him playing with it anyway. And I think he showed he could play guard or center. I think he's lock might be strong. If he's not a 1st-round pick, Tony, I would be very surprised at this point.
Yeah, and, let's go back to what you said. This is the biggest list that we have from both games combined, and it shouldn't surprise anybody, because we're going towards the draft. What is everybody saying on the outside? This is a terrific offensive line class. And we saw that reflected at Shrine practices and Senior Bowl practices. Jackson Powers Johnson was just dominant from day one when he played center. Dominant, not only physically but mentally. you could see he knows what's going on. He played center. He did a great job quarterbacking the unit. The thing about him is he's strong at the point, but he's able to get out to the second level. He moves well on his feet, even with that bad hamstring. I went up to his team afterwards and I congratulated him. I didn't see the guy lose a rep. I did not see the guy lose a rep.
Me neither.
And I agree with you. Unlike Bo Nix, his teammate at Oregon, who had to come in here and do certain things to cement himself as a first-round pick, I think Powers Johnson did exactly what he needed to do to cement himself in the late part of round one for a team that needs an interior offensive lineman, like you said, could play center or guard. Played guard in 2021, played right guard at Oregon in 2021, did a terrific job, then took over at center this year and was terrific. So I think he leaves Mobile, even with the hamstring injury, even with the fact that he didn't practice 3 days, with a first-round grade.
Yeah, look out for the Dallas Cowboys at the end of round one there. They're picking 24th. Tyler Biadasz, their starting center, will likely leave. And they can always move Tyler Smith out the left tackle if Tyron Smith retires. I could see that being a fit for Dallas late in that first round. Isaiah Adams, Tony, I'm happy you had him on your list. And I'll talk about him individually because I had a chance to talk to Jim Nagy on the Giants Huddle podcast. So that'll be airing later in the week. You guys should go check that out. And he said he interviewed great with teams. When he talked to teams, who are your best interviews, he was constantly in their top 3 or top 5. But then you look at what he did on the field. He had to play tackle his last year at Indiana, kind of out of position. When he took guard reps, he did not get moved around. And I think that's what kind of stuck out to me. A lot of these guys in these one-on-one reps, Tony, they're going to get pushed back into the lap of the quarterback. But at 6'4", 316, he was solid as a rock. Guys were not moving him.
He was a rock. I mean, he held the point. He did not give up an inch of ground. He is a mean, nasty power gap blocker. He's a guy who I think rep after rep, day after day, answered the call. I think I saw him get beaten just once or twice in 3 days by speed rushers. But overall, he was on top of his game. Not as good as Powers Johnson, but really, really very effective. And I think he solidified himself as a day 2 pick. More of a power gap blocker. If you run a zone blocking system, you're not going to look towards Isaiah Adams. More of your wink Pittsburgh Steeler type of blocker in day 2, that type of guy. And, he was just another Illinois guy. We mentioned Tip Ryman. We mentioned Casey Washington. Isaiah Williams also had a good week at the Shrine Bowl. And here it is, Isaiah Adams, another Illinois guy, really showing well, in the postseason All-Star games.
Yeah, Isaiah Williams, you mentioned him, wide receiver at the Shrine game, my former quarterback. I thought he did a really nice job. I'm very happy you with Javion Cohen on your list, Tony, because the more and more I watch him, the more I liked him.
He's like Isaiah Adams in the sense that more of a power gap guy, would square up into defenders in the one-on-one, would not give up an inch of room, like the fundamentals, like the fact that, he was playing with good knee bend. That last day of practice, I was really searching, especially that afternoon practice, to find guys who were doing well. It looked like they were breaking down. And it was Cohen who, rep after rep, snap after snap, really stepped it up, was able to control the opponent to the point of attack. Again, not a guy that you're going to use in a zone blocking system. You don't want to ask him to cover too much area, but a real strong, punching him out type of power gap blocker.
And Christian Haynes, he might have been the second best interior guy there after Jackson Powers Johnson. I thought the first day he was feeling things out a little bit. He got beat a couple times, but then next couple days, it was hard to find him losing a rep out of UConn. He did a really nice job.
Yeah, and again, I sound redundant, a power gap guy. I mean, a big, strong, nasty guy, takes up a lot of room, blocks with solid fundamentals. You don't want to put him in motion too much, struggle to adjust. But I mean, if you want to basically, you want your offensive lineman to go forward and not sideways, that's what Haynes is for. And, really from day one, he stood out to us because we were both there watching, and he was beating up defenders left and right.
And then you have, let's go to Andrew Rame next, Tony. He was somebody that was a multiple position guy. He had to me, he was a little up and down. He had some really, really good reps. Then he had others where he got overwhelmed a little bit, but I thought he had some really good moments over the course of the week.
Especially at center. The reason I put Ray in there is because there's a variety. You talk to scouts, and there's a big spectrum. And a lot of people think he's a mid-day 3 pick. A lot of guys, people think he's a 3rd-round pick. I thought from the center position, he did relatively well. Again, good fundamentals, bends his knees, moves relatively well. You watch him on film, there's no outstanding aspect of his game, but I thought he came and he competed, day after day after day. as did
he had one real just real quick. He had one really good rep against Devondre Sweat, who just started dominating people the second and third days of practice, and that jumped out to me. Right, he was able to hold up against that type of power.
And Sweat probably's got about 20 to 30 pounds on him.
Oh, at least.
And you talk about smaller centers who I thought really played well. Matthew Lee at the Shrine Bowl practices. I mean, the guy's like 290 pounds. His playing weight's probably a little bit smaller than that, but he stood up against some of those bigger defensive tackles. Shrine Bowl held the point, held his ground, was not overwhelmed. Great job quarterbacking the offensive line. That's one thing, they talk about the quarterbacks, but when you see an offensive lineman who's basically playing with two new guys to his left, two new guys to his right, you want to see how he controls the unit. And I thought that Matthew Lee, who started his career at Central Florida, then played last year at Miami, Florida, I thought he did very well. He did much better than I expected. And that's what you want to see at these games. You come in with expectations, and you want the players to exceed those expectations.
Yeah, and then one more center that I know impressed me, I was happy to see him on your list, was Kingsley Eguakun from Florida. I was surprised to see him only measure 300 pounds because I thought he played with pretty good power, and he uses his leverage really well.
Punch in him out type of guy.
Yeah.
You could see him. He's always got his head on a swivel, was always looking for someone to hit, very quick off the snap, smooth and fluid out to the second level. And again, a guy who exceeded expectations.
All right, let's hit this offensive tackle group, Tony. There's a lot of names here, so I'll just let you feature who you want to feature.
Well, I mean, start with Tyler Guyton, who I thought, he looked athletic, he looked mobile, he looked agile, played left and right tackle, did a real good job. Some concerns about him off the field, some concerns because he was benched during the season. I thought he came in and really showed why some scouts believe he's a potential top 15 pick. Walter Rouse at the Shrine Bowl, who was Guyton's teammate at Oklahoma. Walter Rouse, who started his career at Stanford, primarily played right tackle, did a terrific job, moved over to left tackle, got pounded on one rep by the kid from Charlotte, who we're going to talk about, but then came back and really competed the next couple of days and showed real well at left tackle. So he played both left tackle and right tackle well during Shrine Bowl practices. The inside scoop on Walter Rouse is he's a soft guy. He's not a guy who really competes all the time. I didn't think that was the case at the Shrine Bowl practice. I think he really stepped up. Fuaga of Oregon State had his moments. Wasn't consistently as good, I thought, as Tyler Guyton, but also looked really good.
And he was right tackle only, too, we should point out.
Correct. Who else I got on the
list? It's funny. Yeah. I forgot to ask Nagy about Fuaga. But yeah, look, I think he only practiced 2 days. I thought he did a really nice job. The body, Tony, does scream guard. I understand why some people look at him and they say, all right, that guy looks like a guard. But I didn't see anything in practice that makes me think he can't be a tackle in the NFL. I'm curious to see if any NFL teams think he can move over to the left side.
Strong and moves very well. I thought the kid from Kingsley Eguakun. Wow, I butchered his name.
Kingsley Suamataia.
Thank you. Why do I got a different name here? I thought he played well, especially early in the week. I mean, it would seem to me what was happening was a lot of these guys who, some of them hadn't played football for a while, some of them are banged up. They really came out of the gate hot, and by Thursday they looked a little, like they were a little petering out, and the injuries caught up. I thought he did very well. Christian Jones of Texas, I thought he also had his moments. He's tall, he's got growth potential, he moves relatively well. Was a bit up and down, but I thought he was better than expected.
And he was also right tackle only. He played a couple guard snaps, which I don't think went that well for him, but I thought the right tackle snaps went okay. Javon Foster, I thought was interesting. Yeah. Clumsy is maybe the wrong word, but he didn't look the most coordinated at tackle, no. But he's big and he's long, and I thought he got the job done more often than not.
And that's his MO. I mean, if you watch Missouri, he's a guy who's not always on balance, but when he's on balance, he's strong, he moves well, he blocks with solid fundamentals, and he's got a body that's just going to get bigger and stronger. So if he can get that portion of his game, figured out, which is an incredibly important portion of his game, the balance, I mean, he's got starting NFL potential.
Two other guys I want to mention, Tony, real quick, before we move on to the defensive side of the ball. One is Jordan Morgan. Curious to see what you thought about him. measured in just under 33-inch arms. I thought he had some issues at tackle throughout the week. He did not take any reps at guard, which I'm sure NFL teams would have liked to see. But I'm sure he doesn't want NFL teams to think he's a guard, so he decided not to do that, not surprisingly. Your thoughts on Morgan?
I thought he struggled all week, and it's a short arms. I saw him get pushed back in the pocket on a number of occasions. I saw him get run over. I saw some good reps, but I saw a lot of things that concerned me. And I said to his team, I was like, you better ask him, excuse me, you better ask the scouts and the coaches to move him into guard, because he's mobile, he's athletic, and he looks like he needs a running start. Now, that being the case, there were some teams that I spoke with that like Jordan Morgan more than Tyler Guyton. And I guess it depends on the type of system that you run. If you're running a zone blocking system where you want your offensive lineman to move vertically as well as forward, you're going to like a Jordan Morgan because he's got that ability. And I agree with you. I think the arms that are under 33 inches are really going to kill his chances at left tackle. But I've always thought, his best position is at guard in his zone blocking system.
Visa uses advanced AI to help stop fraud, so Brie can be all slurp, no worries. Yum.
What do you think of Patrick Paul?
Up and down. I mean, he looks the part. He's a guy who, will look terrific on one snap, and then you're wondering what's happened the other snaps because he's getting run over, he's getting beat. I think he's got a lot of potential. There were some scouts coming in the season that thought first round. I'm thinking third, fourth round. I think he's one of those guys that's going to need a year or two of development before he's really ready to step on an NFL field.
And I want to tip the cat to Roger Rosengarten, Tony. I thought he did a nice job. He played right tackle and he played some left tackle as well. And after a really tough college football playoff final for him, where Michigan kind of, frankly, took him for a bit of a ride and had some issues in that game. And you never want that to be the last taste in the mouth that you put in NFL scouts. And I think he erased that a little bit. I think this Senior Bowl experience for him was a huge mouthwash deal where you get the taste that out of your mouth from what they saw in that final game against Michigan. I thought he was solid all week. I thought he did a nice job. He's going to be a day 2 pick.
Got beat a couple times by Adisa Isaac, the undersized pass rusher from Penn State, who we'll talk about, but I agree with you. And the thing about Rosengarten is he moves very well on his feet. He's strong, but he shows the ability to get on the second level quickly and fluidly. He's not a heavy-footed guy who rumbles around the field. I agree with you. I have a second-round grade on him right now.
All right, so let's jump to the edge players then, Tony. Then we'll get to the big guys in the middle of that defensive line next. Adisa Isaac, you mentioned a couple reps against Rosengarten. He also beat Fuaga 3 out of 4 reps in one series during team. I think that was on day 2 of practice. I know you've always been a big fan of his. You like him and his teammate, Chop Robinson. But I thought Isaac did well for himself. I think he's going to be a day 2 pick as well.
Beat Fuaga and beat Rosengarten out of a 3-point stance. A couple times they move him over left tackle. They would have him stand over tackle, stand as a 3-4 outside linebacker, which I believe is his best position. Showed up a lot of athletic ability there, showed a lot of speed up the field off the edge, showed a lot of balance. He wasn't a guy that was getting engulfed. He wasn't a guy that was getting knocked off his feet or knocked off balance. He's strong for his size. I think he's 6'4", 250 came in, shows he's got some growth potential, but he's got the athleticism. So, if you line him up in 3-point stance, you can use him in his own, backed off the line of scrimmage in his own blitz, showed a lot of pass rushing potential against top offensive tackles.
No, I'm with you. I think he did a great job. And same thing with Marshawn Kneeland, a guy that I wasn't familiar with coming into the game out of Western Michigan. Measured at 6'3", 268 with 34-inch arms. That's automatically and an 83.5-inch wingspan. That's going to get teams going, ooh, okay. And then you watch him play and you're like, wow, this guy's a really good athlete too. He was probably the most explosive edge rusher we had there. I thought Marshawn Kneeland did himself huge favors. He's going to be a day 2 pick as well.
Yeah, very athletic, moves incredibly well. He's got to get a little bit stronger, 6'3", 260 something. He better run really fast if they're going to stand him up over tackle. Otherwise, he's going to be defensive end in a 4-man front. But again, he didn't have great pass rushing production at Western Michigan, but you saw those flashes. You saw the ability to get up the field off the edge. You saw the ability to change direction and move down the line of scrimmage in pursuit. So you saw that athleticism on film, and we saw it firsthand at the Senior Bowl practice.
You liked Jalen Harrell from Michigan.
I thought he had his moments. Again, primarily standing over tackle, which is what he did at Michigan. Gets a lot of force up the field, gets a lot of speed off the edge. Don't know, third, fourth round, but I think he's a guy that you're going to use early in pass rush packages, sort of your pass rush specialist as he develops a complete game. I thought he showed a lot of athleticism, a lot of ability to get up the field.
Two of the bigger name edge players there, Latu, Tony. I thought the athleticism, much like on tape, doesn't blow you away, but he just won. He just kept winning. Hands, moves. He was a technician. And then I want to throw Chris Braswell in there, too. You could talk about both these guys. He's a guy that I loved his edge rush and his speed, his athleticism. I thought he came into this week with one plan, and he kind of confirmed this for me when I talked to him, and go check it out again on the Giants Huddle podcast, on an interview podcast from late last week, that he wanted to show his power this week. And I think he went out of his way to show that I can bull rush, I can hold at the point of attack. I'm not just this speed bendy guy. I can win with power. And I think Braswell went out of his way to show that, even if that meant maybe he wasn't as dominant in some of those one-on-one drills.
And that's fine, but the thing, I think the difference between Braswell and Latu is Latu showed a lot of agility. He showed the ability to go outside, go inside, get down the line of scrimmage. Braswell was basically up the field type of guy, and we know he can get up the field. Want to see him, he's got to show that versatility to back off the line of scrimmage and play in space, which I didn't really see him do. Maybe I missed it, because if he can't do that, that's going to depress his draft stock, because teams will say, well, he's either one-dimensional or we're going to have to try and teach him to do this, and he's not going to come into the league ready to do this. That's why Braswell's a day 2 pick, and Latu is a first-round pick.
I'm with you. All right, let's go to the rest of the edge players here. A bunch of Murphys at the Shrine game, Tony. You could talk about all the Murphys. There were many of them. And then a couple other guys that you like from that Shrine game as well.
Well, Gabriel and Grayson Murphy of UCLA, they were kind of trading days. The first day, Gabriel was good. Grayson was good. The second day, Gabriel was good. And they did it both out of a 3-point stance and standing over tackle. Both guys are very athletic. And Iabi Okoye, say the name for me, John.
Iabi Oki.
Thank you. Iabi Oki from Charlotte, who previous to that played at, where was he? Michigan. Previous to that, he was at Tennessee Martin. Previous to that, he was Alabama. This guy just showed the athleticism and the explosion and the ability to overpower blockers or beat them around the edge that people have been waiting to see for 5 years now. And, if you're able to listen to John's interview with him, he was brutally honest about himself. And, you just hope that the light has finally gone on for this guy.
Yeah. And again, you can check that out again on the Giants Huddle podcast. Go find that. It's from late last week. All right, let's go to the interior guys here, Tony. And I'll put two guys into the same category just because they're similar body types in the way they play, though their paths are a lot different and their tape is a little bit different. Braden Fisk and Michael Hall. Hall, who is very inconsistent at Ohio State. Unlike all those other Ohio State guys, he went back. He did not, but he's undersized, just 280 pounds, but he was getting upfield and winning with quickness all week. And then so was Braden Fisk from Florida State by way of Western Michigan. Boy, his energy was just contagious and got off the snap. When he gets in front of these teams, they're going to fall in love with him just because of his energy and his effort.
And his attitude. I mean, he's nonstop go, and he's a guy who he explodes off the snap with a great first step. He plays with great pad level. He's undersized, and he gets leverage on guys, which makes him tough to stop. The only thing about Fisk is he's basically singularly, a one-gap, 3 technique type. You wonder if he's going to be an every down player. Michael Hall at the Senior Bowl is reminiscent of the Michael Hall at Ohio State that we saw in 2022, where you come up to 2022 film and you're like, hey, this guy's potentially a late first-round pick. And then last year, he was not good. I mean, he had his moments late in the season, he had his moments against Michigan, but for the most part, he disappeared in the first half of the season. And, asked him why he entered the draft when so many guys were going back. And it was family concerns, so you think there's some sort of economic reason or financial reason why he entered the draft. I mean, you got to figure out Scott's going to have to figure out which Michael Hall they're getting. Are they getting the guy that was at the Senior Bowl, guy from 2022? Or are they getting the guy that, played in spurts last year in 2023? Another real good, explosive, athletic, 1-gap, 3 technique type.
Yeah, 2 other guys that I think helped themselves. I'll throw 3 in there that helped themselves at the Senior Bowl. Dwayne Carter out of Duke, Tony. Both of us thought he was very good during the week. Jordan Jefferson from LSU, I thought, had a nice week. And then we should pick out the guy who maybe was the best defensive player up front at the Senior Bowl. That was Darius Robinson out of Missouri, who had a wonderful week. No one could block him. Inside, outside, speed, power, technique, you name it.
Tall guy. I think he's 6'5", 286 pounds, very mobile, occasionally stood over tackle. And as I wrote at Sportskeeda, I mean, there was talk about Darius Robinson ending up in the first round. I don't have him as a first round pick, but with that sort of body type and that athleticism to be used on the outside, on the inside, in different packages, I could see him. Jordan Jefferson, sort of a little bit different in the sense that he was more of your bullish type. He's more of your mauler. He was the guy on the inside that just ran over people and that people could not move off the point when they blocked him. Wayne Carter, I thought, was fantastic. I think, number one, he came in at 308 pounds or something like that, and his playing weight was 290, but he showed the ability to handle that weight. I mean, he moved well. He was quick. He was beating opponents with power, with moves, with agility, excellent pad level. And I think he's someone who has absolutely solidified himself as a day 2 selection.
And then I want to throw out one more guy, Austin Booker out of Kansas, Tony. He's an edge guy. He's not a tackle. I thought he showed some explosiveness off the edge as well.
Surprisingly, I mean, those last couple of days, especially Thursday, he was a guy who couldn't be stopped. And when a lot of players were struggling that last day, Booker was winning those one-on-ones and getting a lot of penetration upfield.
I'm with you. All right, there were some guys at the Shrine game that you liked as well inside, highlighted by Christian Boyd.
Christian Boyd was terrific. The kid from Northern Iowa has not received the combine invite, was not on the scouting radar before the season. He's a bigger guy. He was overpowering blockers. He was beating them with quickness with this first step. Just kept getting better and better. And all 3 days, people could not stop Christian Boyd. And I kept writing and tweeting about him. And I could have written about him the last day of practice as I did the first day of practice because he was good. Has not gotten a combine invite. He's going to be one of those guys to watch at Pro Day because he was just so terrific during Shrine Bowl practices. Again, guy who was not graded coming into the season. I think he's absolutely cemented himself as a day 3 pick.
And then we did not mention Gabe Hall from the Senior Bowl too, Tony, who looks the part, almost 6'6", 290 pounds, over 34-inch arms. And he was productive at defensive tackle. And he's a guy of that size. He could be pretty versatile to move up and down the line.
Well, I had a different take on Gabe Hall. I mean, he was winning a lot of one-on-ones. Like you said, he looks the part, but the production isn't there on the field. And you wonder about Gabe Hall. I know that Jim Nagy was a big fan of his throughout the season, but you watch the film and you look, sometimes Gabe Hall doesn't even register on the stat sheet. And it's not like he's occupying the blockers on the inside. So you wonder what's going on, Gabe Hall. You watch the Senior Bowl practices, especially those one-on-ones. You know he's got the ability. You got to wonder, where is the production on the field? Why don't we see it?
No, with you 100%. All right, let's go to linebackers here, Tony, and we'll start with some of the guys at the Shrine game that you really liked.
The guys at the Shrine game, I thought, were the best coverage linebackers. They were the guys who had the easiest time in those one-on-one drills, even in scrimmage, staying with the tight ends, staying with the running backs. Easton Gibbs of Wyoming had a couple of terrific days at practice, had a couple of nice pass breakups, had an interception, I believe, on the last day. Sonny Anderson of Grambling State, more of your pass rusher, but showed a lot of athleticism in his game. Dallas Gant of Toledo, by way of Ohio State, also showed a lot of athleticism and some ability to cover. The one thing that is really exposed in these drills during practice with the linebackers and the safeties, can you move backwards? Can you cover? Because so many times we saw so many linebackers who looked like their feet were stuck in cement in the coverage drills. And you're like, that guy's a 2-down linebacker, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. You got to take him off the field. Not the situation with Easton Gibbs.
No question. And then two guys that I think maybe did not have a lot of success doing those two things that you have marked off here is James Williams, who's a converted safety from Miami. He played linebacker at the Senior Bowl, and Curtis Jacobs, the Penn State linebacker that was at Shrine.
Yeah, I mean, James Williams, you expected him to have an easier time in coverage because of his safety background, and I didn't really see it. I didn't see smoother or quick hips that he was able to flip in coverage. Obviously, it's a new position, but I thought he would have been better against the pass than he was against the run, and I didn't see it. And Curtis Jacobs, I mean, listen, I've been a big Curtis Jacobs fan for 3 years. He entered the draft. He entered the season with potential first-round grades. and he's kind of fallen off the map. I mean, he really was not at the Shrine Bowl. You expected him to really step up the way we saw, say, Steel Chambers of Ohio State a couple times. But really, I mean, he's been very quiet, not only at the Shrine Bowl, but really through the 2003 season. And he was someone who considered entering the 2023 draft, where he would have been a day 2 pick. It's going to be very tough for Curtis Jacobs. I like to end up in day 2 of the draft.
And 2 linebackers I want to mention, Tony, from the Senior Bowl that I thought flashed a little bit. One was Peyton Wilson from North Carolina State. Now, unfortunately, he got nicked up at the end of the week, which has been a consistent feature of his college career. Yeah. So he couldn't finish the week. And then I like Cedric Gray out of North Carolina. He had a couple pass deflections in the game, and I thought he was good in coverage throughout the week as well.
Yeah, I mean, Gray he's probably going to be a middle linebacker, inside linebacker, but he's more of your typical 4-3 weak side traditional space linebacker, which is kind of fallen off the map. But he's a smart guy. He goes sideline to sideline. Wilson, you said it, and I talked to North Carolina State people at the Shrine Bowl, and they told me right out there, like, yeah, the medicals are going to be a big issue for him moving towards the combine, where when you look at the film, you're looking at a day 2 pick, potential late first round pick over his career. But those injuries, which have been pretty significant in the past, have just piled up. And they're going to be a major red flag during combine medicals, combine interviews, those sorts of things.
All right, let's go to the defensive backs. And let's start with one guy that really jumped out at us at Shrine Game, Tony. And you can mention anyone else down there in Frisco that you like. But that was Quantez Stiggers, who did a really nice job. He's the Canadian player who hasn't played college football, became ineligible. He had to leave college because his father passed away tragically. Ended up playing in a professional league, couldn't go back to school. He played with the Argonauts last year, and he had a nice week down there. And then Jarius Monroe had a nice week too, and he played well in the game.
I thought Quintez Stiggers probably helped himself more than any prospect in any of these games because you really didn't know too much about him. Yeah, there was the Canadian film. And, when we spoke to Eric Galco at the Shrine Bowl, he told us that NFL teams kept inquiring. They wanted to sign him as a free agent, but the league said, no, he's got to go through the draft process. And this guy was dynamite every day, Shrine Bowl practice, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. He was shutting people down. He showed the ability to stay downfield with them, did a great job making plays with his back to the ball, getting his head back around, tracking the pass in the air. I mean, he was your shutdown corner, as people like to say, and he was that for 3 days. Now, obviously, playing in the CFL, he does have some professional experience. I think the only way Stiggers doesn't end up in day 2 of the draft is if he lays a duck at the combine and he runs in the high 4.5. But he was a guy who, I even mentioned it on Twitter. He just blew me away day after day after day. It wasn't a couple of plays. It was almost every single snap with Stiggers.
Yeah, it was a consistency. It was just he never got beat. He just never got beat.
No. And Monroe, I thought, played very well the last day of practice. We watched them. They were moving in between corner and safety. He looked a lot more comfortable at cornerback. His position in college showed a lot of solid ball skills. With Monroe, it's going to come down to the 40 time. And when you interviewed him, he seemed, people think I'm not going to run fast. We'll see what he runs. But he knows it's an issue, and he knows it's a question that he has to answer. But still, a competitive guy who I think is going to be real good at dime packages to the next level.
All right, let's go to some of the other players. And Quinion Mitchell, Tony, at the Senior Bowl, only played a couple days. But, with him, Jackson Powers Johnson, Darius Robinson, which one of those guys was the best player there? Whatever, take your pick. But he was certainly in the conversation. We wanted to see him play press. He played press down in Mobile, and frankly, nobody could really catch many balls on him except for one Roman Wilson one-on-one when he slipped coming out of his break. Otherwise, Mitchell was wonderful, knocking balls away, being sticky in coverage, and grabbing an interception or two as well. He checked every box.
We talked about some of the receivers that people have in the late first round. I came into the week saying if Quinion Mitchell has a good week, he needs a good week to cement himself as a first-round pick. I think he's absolutely done it. And I think he's moved up draft boards. And I think he's going to be one of the first 3 cornerbacks selected late in round 1. He was that good. And if you go back through Senior Bowl history, quarterback, offensive tackle, pass rushers, and cornerbacks, if you have a good week at the Senior Bowl at cornerback, you're really going to elevate your draft stock. And that's what Mitchell did. Like you said, that one play against Roman Wilson, slipped out of his transition. Roman Wilson also slipped. They called it a catch, but it probably wouldn't be a catch on NFL standards. but he was shut down every single snap. And, I listened to your interview with him, and he just seems like a very level-headed, confident person that, if there is an issue or he does give up a reception, he's just going to come back and compete the next snap, which is what you need at the cornerback spot.
Yeah, I was trying to get his energy up. He's very flatlined, very matter of fact. And the fact that, Tony, he stayed 4 years at Toledo instead of hitting the transfer portal, and trust me, schools are lined up to take him, that he stayed there. And I asked him why. He said, yeah, I just felt loyalty to the people in the program that got me there. That's going to resonate with NFL teams as well. They're going to love that.
Absolutely. He could have gone the Brandon Fisk route because Brandon Fisk played at Western Michigan, right? The same conference, the MAC conference. But he stayed there. And the thing with Mitchell at Toledo, stepping away from the Senior Bowl, he's been good for 3 years there. I mean, it's not a situation where people just can't, some people may be hopping on the bandwagon now, but if you watch the past 3 years, I mean, he was good and he's tall. I mean, he's not as short. He's got those NFL measurables. He's talking about, I talked to people there. What did he say to you in the interview about the combine? He wants to set records. We'll see if it happens, but obviously he's expecting a lot of himself from the testing portion at the combine.
All right, what other DBs jumped out at you, Tony?
I thought Evan Williams, the two kids from Oregon, Evan Williams and Kyrie Jackson, played very well. Evans, the safety, one of the guys last day made a couple nice plays in the red zone. Kyrie Jackson, I mean, he's got safety size, and he just beat down opponents. A guy who wasn't graded coming in the season, an underclassman that, took advantage of the fact that now the league is, allowing underclassmen to play in these games. I thought he did very well. Terheeb Still of Maryland at the Shrine game got injured and wasn't on the field late in the week, which was a problem last year for him at Maryland. But early in the week, he showed ball skills and why some scouts coming into the season had him graded as a mid-round pick.
I know a couple of guys you didn't think necessarily helped themselves, Tony, and poor Kalen King. I don't know what happened to him after his previous year in school. I loved his tape last year. I thought it was really good. And then this year, he just didn't look like the same guy. And then even, Tony, when I talked to him, he didn't seem like a kid that had that confidence you need a cornerback to be successful. So he had trouble covering guys here at the Senior Bowl. He needs to, I don't know if it's mental with him or what, but he needs to figure out what's gone wrong for him over the last year or so.
Yeah, and his draft stock has taken a major hit. And he even admitted to you in that interview that he's not playing his best football. He came out and he admitted to you. I mean, I was not as high on him coming into the season as a lot of other people. He struggled during the season. He got hammered by Marvin Harrison Jr. in that Ohio State game, and he got hammered at the Senior Bowl. Couldn't stop anybody. I mean, Quintez Walker was beating him left and right, as we said early on. Just couldn't stop anybody. I mean, I think right now, people were talking about Kalen King as a potential first-round choice. I always have him in the bottom half of round 2. Right now, I got a 5th-round grade on him because, doesn't matter the size, and he's, 5'11" and change. Doesn't matter the speed. If you can't make plays with your back to the ball, and he can't, and you're getting beat by by receivers through the route separation, and that's what we saw. Where do you play at the next level?
No, I'm with you. And then finally, not Quantez Stiggers. We talk about him, Tony. Kenny Logan was the last guy you wanted to mention.
Kenny Logan, Shrine Bowl. I mean, he was one of those safeties that looked like their feet were stuck in cement during coverage drills at the Shrine Bowl. And, the receiver would make his move, and then a second or two later, Kenny Logan would react, and it was just constantly getting beat on the field, constantly getting beat in those drills, which you can't do if you're a safety because now you're relegated to being basically a downhill run defending safety, which is what he looked like during Shrine Bowl practice.
All right, Tony, let's wrap this up here with this, and we'll figure out what our content's going to be the next few weeks. Next week, we are going to have our show. As always, guys, we'll come your way every Wednesday. We record on Tuesdays, post on Wednesday as we get ready for the draft. So what's the next 3 weeks like? I know NFL teams pivot to combine prep now, and then they're doing free agency meetings as well. So this is a little bit of a break now as the front offices begin to focus a bit on free agency. So what's the draft process like at this point, not only for teams, but also for players as they gear up for the combine, which, believe it or not, is only 3 weeks away. Comes fast.
It's funny because when I got back from Senior Bowl after 6 days at Shrine Senior Bowl, I let the guys at Sports Skater know. I was like, this is kind of quiet time. There's not going to be a whole lot of news. What I look for now is to get reports from training. who's doing really well, who's going to jump through the roof, whose 40 time is going to be faster, and who's showing up to training 2 or 3 days a week, who's not taking their combine training seriously. That's been the case with a couple of guys in the past. So you keep your ear to the ground. You try and get as much information on that. And again, like the Senior Bowl, some of the guys who Shrine Bowl, some of the guys who exceeded expectations. That's what you want to find out, as we move towards the combine, before the combine, towards the combine training, who's running faster than expected, any injuries which may prevent these guys from working out the combine. So it's a lot of, sort of under the table news, especially with the guys who, aren't working as hard as they should. And there are those guys, and we've seen them. Giants had one, the kid from Georgia, the cornerback, a couple of years ago.
Oh, DeAndre Baker. Yeah, let's not remind Giant fans of that.
And that was a guy who just never took his combine training seriously, and we saw that extension through his entire play. So you keep your ears open, or I keep my ears open for that.
Yeah, and again, it's not the fact that you're not training for the combine that's important, but it's a red flag to show, well, if you're not willing to put all the work in to get drafted high and get that big monster contract, how willing are you going to be able to work after you get that contract and you actually make it to the pros? So I think it gives you a window into the football character of some of these guys based on how they handle this part of the process, right?
Or just the general character, not just the football character, the general character. Because remember, a lot of this has come very easy to these guys in high school and college because they're so much bigger, or they're so much more athletic, or they're so faster than everybody else. All of a sudden on Sundays, that's not the case. That's why you got to take this stuff seriously.
Tony, this was fun. I enjoyed spending a week with you down in Frisco and Mobile. It was a lot of fun, learned a lot, and we'll talk to everybody next week. That's another episode of Draft Season right here. Again, you can find it on the Giants app. You can find it on giants.com/podcast. But remember, this is not a Giants podcast, folks. This is a draft podcast. So if you have friends that aren't Giant fans that want to learn about the draft, please tell them to go check out Draft Season. It would sure help us out. Go subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. This episode of Draft Season was brought to you by Visa. Visa looks at over 500 data points on transactions to help prevent fraud, so you can worry less and focus on your next podcast. Shop with Visa because security looks good on you. Again, hopefully Draft Season is your next podcast. We'll be back with you next Wednesday. Before then, we've had a ton of draft content as well on the Giants Huddle podcast, so go check that out. We have individual player interviews. We have Eric Galko. We have Jim Nagy coming up. We have Jordan Reed recapping the week down there in Mobile. So a lot of good stuff. Make sure you go check that out right here on your Giants Podcast Network. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmuck. We'll see you next week, everybody.
At Cocoa Beach, boredom doesn't stand a chance. Cocoa Beach is your authentic Florida beach town, packed with attractions to make your vacation the funnest yet. Whether you're catching waves, strolling along the iconic pier, or savoring delicious seafood, Cocoa Beach has something for everyone. A laid-back charm and lively atmosphere make Cocoa Beach your next unforgettable vacation. Explore the fun side of Orlando, Cocoa Beach on Florida's Space Coast. Visit LegendaryCocoaBeach.com. That's LegendaryCocoaBeach.com.
Tired of restless nights? At Leesa, we know good sleep is essential for mental, physical, and emotional health. From memory foam mattresses to hybrids that keep you cool all night long, Leesa's mattresses offer exceptional comfort and support with free delivery and 100 nights to try out your mattress in the comfort of your home. For a limited time, save up to $700 off select mattresses plus 2 free pillows. Go to leesa.com/iHeart for an additional $50 off mattresses and select goods. Exclusions apply. See leesa.com for more details.